What's happening, boys and girls? It's your boy, the Chris Fishgold of Wondering If This Bit's Old, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By Podcast 142, coming at you on Monday, and we're talking about the event that just happened in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden. That's a very American thing, having to list the city and then the state or the country. Paris, France? But yeah, Stockholm nonetheless. And it was a pretty good weekend as a UK-based fight fan, because normally we're getting dicked on by the schedules, and this week we had Stockholm on the Saturday in the afternoon, and then we had Rising at Croissant time on Sunday, which is still the best feature of Rising. Though the Rising card was... it was very much Rising contenders. They should have called it Rising Bushido or something like that. They should have made it separate from their regular brand, which normally has bigger names on the shows. But we won't do any news today. We'll just jump straight into the fights because they were pretty good. And a good number of finishes, actually. So let's go from bottom to top. Joel Alvarez versus Danilo Belluardo. Joel Alvarez is a 6'3" lightweight. These fuckers get bigger every year, it seems. You know, we kept joking about how everyone at lightweight dwarfs BJ Penn now. And the big thing was like, oh, BJ Penn kills himself with that weight cut. Then later it was like, oh, BJ's gone down to featherweight and he's still dwarfed by the dude he's fighting there. But Alvarez is the slender man in that weight class. And this was an interesting fight. I thought they had a good little scrap. Opening of round 2, Alvarez came out and hit a beautiful stepping knee. I've been watching Cyril Gane all week to put up a study for the Patreon boys. And just because I love Cyril Gane, or Gain, as the case may be. But one of the things that's very Muay Thai about his style, which is, I like it because it's so floaty and karate-ish, but he came from Muay Thai and kickboxing, and one of the things that's very Muay Thai about his style is the stepping knees, and he really commits on them. Like, he's missed a few and stepped across himself and fallen over at points, but he's lunging after dudes from across the ring with these stepping knees. And stepping knees are stuff that a few years ago, like, unless you were very comfortable stuffing takedowns, you weren't going from... Like, Machida was one of the few guys... Well, he used to hit him intercepting knee style, but Overeem too... it's a little bit safer if you can intercept and then come in with the underhook immediately as you kick your leg back. You can get, like, to an over-under clinch off the knee, but a lot of guys still very reluctant to throw him. But yeah, this guy was just going from Joel Alvarez. Did get taken down off that, and then the finish was the strangest I've seen in quite a while. He grabbed the over-the-back grip of the wrist, far wrist ride, Dagestani handcuff, whatever you want to call it. But from the bottom, we used to call it a seatbelt. Then the seatbelt by Marcelo Garcia caught on. But Anderson Silva used to like doing it back in the day, from the bottom. And in like half guard, if the guy gets too wide with his hands, it's kind of like if dudes try and Tozy pass you, which is or the Sao Paulo pass, which is where you get the underhook from closed guard, and you switch your hips, and drop onto one of their knees, and then you do like a back step and try and push their guard open like that. It's basically a guard break without posturing up, which is really useful in like no-gi especially, because, in the gi you can actually get grips and stand up. In MMA you can just hit people, but in no-gi opening the guard's a pretty tricky thing to do if you've got someone who's pretty good with their guard and reluctant to do it. So Wilson Hayes was also famous for that, and what was his name? Mikey Garcia? Chim Chim? Roger used to do him too, Roger Gracie. But yeah, one of the things is, like, when dudes start trying to do that, almost invariably, they start leaving their elbow out, and you can hook your far foot in over their back, and you can either sweep them or go to a triangle. Michelle Nicolini also catches that position off, like, spider guard stuff all the time. When she broke Tammy... What's her name? Tammy Misamichi? No. Tammy thinking the American lass, when she broke her arm over her own back, that was the same sort of thing. But yeah, if you can catch someone's arm across their back when they're on top, it's pretty tricky because they don't have a base on that side. And the dude was trying to, he was being mounted at the time, and then he was trying to squirm his way back to half guard because he had this arm tied up. And the other guy was like, no, and then put his head to the mat to try and settle himself, and then realised that his arm wasn't there and just sort of rolled off the top. It was really weird. And then Alvarez came up on top, and he has his arm trapped and he's sitting on his leg, and he just started hammering him with elbows, and the guy gave up, basically. So TKO ground and pound in the second round, but I can't remember ever seeing someone come off the bottom with the over-the-back grip and then keep it and finish the guy from the top. Very peculiar. Especially if you're mounted on the dude at the time. You know, I think it was like quarter guard, and then he advanced to mount, and then got swept or fell off or whatever. But I like Joel Alvarez. I mean, he lost his last fight that I saw, but I came into this fight, and a lot of these guys, the names sort of blur together, but I recognised him, and I went, oh yeah, it's that really fucking tall, gangly, weird dude. So yeah, good on him. Looking forward to his next fight. Devin Clark versus Darko Stojic. This one I was sort of falling asleep through, because Devin Clark is not great. Someone was asking my opinion on Devin Clark the other day, and I just can't get out of my mind the fact that he got rear naked choked standing by Jan Blachowicz by doing like the bad guy thing in a Steven Seagal movie where you swing and he sidesteps and you give up your back and get choked out standing. That's never happened in another professional MMA fight as far as I can recall, and Devin Clark did it. And he had that loss by knockout to Rakish, which we were talking about the other week. So yeah, not too sold on him, but this fight was it was so-so. It was light heavyweight. You know, what more do you want to know? And we lost the light heavyweight fight coming into this event. I said, we got 3 light heavyweight fights back to back to look forward to. And then Ilir Latifi and Volkan Ozdemir dropped out. So then, well, the one that didn't have like a massive underdog in it, really. You know, it was the two sort of closest matched, in your mind at least, going into that card. Malecki versus Santana was peak bad fighting. That was bad striking. And they were telling us that both these lasses are like Muay Thai veterans. They just walked at each other and exchanged straight punches with their heads straight up in the air. It was bad. And then the takedowns were pretty bad too. And then Santana had won the first round. And then in the second round, she gets the clinch. She's got a body lock. So she was going to do that thing where, you know, you throw them over your knee towards their hands. And they either go to their back or onto their hands, and you try and jump on their back or whatever. You know, everyone does it off the fence now. It's that knee position, throw to the floor thing. But she did it and pulled the other lass onto her in mount and got submitted, which was just tragic. But then your boy and mine, Frank Camacho, came out and washed the taste of shit out of our mouths with a fantastic performance against Nick Hein. Frank Camacho, he just recently signed a 4-fight contract, coming off 2 losses, which the reason for that is that if you remember, like, the fight with Drew Dober, I actually didn't remember who won that. I was just like, that was a bloody good fight. So he's exactly the sort of fighter that we always say the UFC should keep around, like Darren Cruikshank. You know, they let him go, but he was fantastic fun and, you know, reliable fun too. You know, if you're tuning into a card and you see Frank Camacho or Darren Cruikshank is up next or in the fight after, you're gonna go, yeah, that's probably gonna be good fun. But he looked really good in this fight, better than usual, in fact. Nick Hein was the southpaw, Frank Camacho was the orthodox fighter, and Camacho kept digging the right straight to the body and the right body kick. Did wonderful work with both of those. And then when Hein came back with punches off the fence because Camacho kept applying the pressure, Camacho would pull away, meet him with the jab, and then come back with the right hand. Love that. Lean away, jab while you're on your back foot, and come back with the right hand. Beautiful combination. Well, beautiful counter combination or beautiful counter. You know, think Jersey Joe dropping Joe Louis. It's an old counter, but it works tremendously. And he kept landing it over and over again. Nick Hein, some neat judo. He hit a beautiful, was it a small outside reap, whatever it is, the outside trip. Hit that in the first round, and Camacho rolled through, managed to get back up, stuff a hand inside, turn and get an underhook. Even when they moved in close and Camacho grabbed a double collar tie and started kneeing, Hein went to go for a single shoulder throw, Ippon Seoinage, and Camacho sort of pushed him away and backed off. Could well have been a feint, you know, that's what Fedor used to do. He'd fake a throw to get guys to just back out of the clinch. He did it against Brett Rogers, when Brett Rogers realised, I can push Fedor to the fence because he's half my size and he hasn't got a lot of experience with the fence. Fedor faked an outside trip, and Rogers stepped away and he just punched and moved out from the fence. And came off a body shot. I mean, there was... it looked a lot like, and I think the commentators called this, so good on them, but it looked a lot like Nick Hein was trying to catch and pitch, hands up, take a couple of punches or a big punch on your guard and then come back with your own punches. And Camacho was actually doing a pretty good job of staying out of range when he didn't want to be hit, and also, dig into the body when Hein put his guard up high. And then there was a moment in round 2 where just Hein had been taking the punches to the body and just sort of gritting his teeth through them, and then suddenly his arms just came down, and you realised, okay, he's not going to be taking those body shots well anymore, and Camacho just stepped in on him and started punching him in the head again, and finished him. Brutal finish. I mean, There was a time when people were saying, yeah, no, we don't really need to finish fights on the feet. TKOs on the feet shouldn't happen. But this one is a good one to point to, where the Hein was out of it and he was just getting punched. And, you didn't really need to wait for him to drop to his knees or his back to see that he was pretty much done. Leonardo Santos versus Stevie Ray. We were talking about this last week, or in the preview episode. We were saying this is the card of not derailed prospects, but sort of like sputtered out of momentum prospects, like Makwan Amakani and Leonardo Santos. Both of them good, and Makwan Amakani lost a split decision, I believe it was, and then disappeared for quite a while. And Leonardo Santos just disappeared for quite a while. He hadn't really, they didn't suffer any punishing defeats. His last defeat was in Sengoku back in 2009 or 2008. So really doing well, but just if you're not active in that division and you're not, Conor McGregor level, so you can't get away with it, other people are going to pass you by constantly. But he gets in with Stevie Ray, who is a very good fighter, and did fantastically. Stevie Ray stepped in for Stevie Ray was southpaw, I believe, so he stepped in for a left straight. Santos pulled away, came back with the right hand, timed it perfectly, and Ray went out like a light, and then woke up immediately. It was kind of like the Tyson Fury one, where the ref could not have counted, but because he did, Tyson Fury did this bizarre eyes open, sit up, right back to work. Obviously, this isn't boxing, and had the ref not jumped in, Leonardo Santos would have followed him to the floor and battered him. But it was one of those ones where he was just completely out and then awake almost immediately afterwards. It was very strange, but absolutely beautiful counterpunch placement. And what people were saying was this proves that it probably wasn't really a fluke against Kevin Lee. And if the wonderful thing about having all that time off, it's not time off. He's not taking a holiday. He's been injured, and other things have kept him out of fights. But having all that time of just training and not worrying about the fight being imminent and so on, gives you time to work on the things that you're not comfortable with. And it's been so long since we've seen him that his boxing has actually gotten even better. I mean, his boxing was still a bit flappy in places, and it was very flappy against Kevin Lee, but clearly he's got an eye for a counter. And, you find with a lot of these guys at the top levels of jiu-jitsu and wrestling and things like that, they can spot an opening, and they can think about, they can reverse engineer how to make an opening, and that's the stuff you just need to train over and over again, because in a fight you're not going to go, how can I create an opening? You have things you go to that usually create openings, which you've worked out in training. So yeah, it's interesting that his striking's coming along so well, but again, it's not uncommon at this point. People are realizing that there are a lot more similarities in terms of just trying to trick people and fake them out than you would previously believe between grappling and striking. Lena Landsberg versus Tonya Evinger. This was actually a decent scrap for what it was. Some nice elbows from Landsberg, a nice bit of grappling from Evinger, but also nice counter grappling by Landsberg. I wasn't blown away, but never am by that division. Ackman versus Kandosko, I sort of skipped. I was half watching it. It wasn't great. Daniel Tamer finally got his first UFC win against Sung Bin Jo. Sung Bin Jo looked fucking massive. He came in and I was like, uh-oh, this could be one of those horrendous hometown boy gets starched by a guy we've never heard of but quickly becomes star. But he was huge and did nothing with it. It was very strange. I mean, he attempted a nice armbar in the first round because Daniel Tamer came out swinging and took him down immediately. But Tamer did the step over, where the arm's sort of straight, and you're like, uh-oh, this could be a submission. If Kevin Sataki's the ref, it certainly could be. But yeah, stepped over, got out, got back to the feet. And David Tamer was doing this thing where he was like, come on, engage me, and playing to the crowd. And you're like, he's not actually not engaging you. But wasn't it did I say Daniel Tamer or David Tamer there? But wasn't it David Tamer who was fighting Draco Close, and Close was doing that while also getting pieced up? Because that pissed me off too. People who do that, like, come on, when the guy is there. It's just like, he's not running from you, you're just not hitting him as much as you want to. I mean, not blown away, but it's nice that Daniel Tamer got a win, especially in front of his home crowd. Sung Bin Jo, if you didn't see him fight, if you just saw him in his, I was going to say his octagon pants, if you just saw him in his trunks ready to fight, you'd be like, shit, this guy, he's going to be big. But, no, he's, well, he looks like a specimen. I don't know if he is a specimen, but I certainly wasn't blown away by what he showed here. Jaguars versus Hasdovic. Yeah, it was all right. Makwan Amakani versus Chris Fishgold. I thought this was good. This was two guys with some good grappling. I was surprised because Amakani was playing up his boxing big, and he did look very relaxed and comfortable in there, but it wasn't really working. Like, Fishgold moved into the fence and was timing his jab and coming with counters and smacking him straight over the head with them. So the boxing wasn't really remarkable, but the takedowns were nice. He timed those perfectly, 2 of them. And then, is it the second one or the third one? But Chris Fishgold hit or snatched up a guillotine, was threatening like an arm-in guillotine or a 10-finger. Can't remember what it was, but it was the sort of kink-wristed one straight on the front of the throat. Amakani managed to scramble out of it or rolled through and pass. Can't remember what it was. But yeah, got to half guard. Fishgold came up on the underhook. Amakani took him to the front, sprawled out to the front headlock, grabbed the anaconda and rolled through, and Fishgold and him ran in a circle for a while. You know, it was cool because it was 2 guys who clearly know what they're doing very well on the ground. But you got a submission victory from it. It was very cool. Can't complain about that fight. It was good. So Amakani can get back in the mix. I mean, it's 145, so it's another division of killers. It's very hard to get spotted there, especially if you're on the European cards, which are limbo. But very impressed. Then you had your co-main event, because obviously Ilir Latifi and Volkan Ozdemir dropped out. Jimmy Manawa versus Alexander Rakish. Rakish smoked him. I said on Twitter, like, Jimmy Manawa is a terrifying man until people realize, or he was a terrifying man, until people realized that they could bite down on their mouthpiece and run at him. Because he's quite flusterable and a little bit chinny. I mean, chinny isn't going to make a damn bit of difference when you're getting head kicked with that sort of force clean, because you heard it was bad. But Jimmy was sort of reaching in this one. Rakic would come in. I mean, there were only a few exchanges before it happened, but Rakic would step in and Jimmy would reach to parry his jab and move backwards at the same time. And it's kind of one of, you don't want to say don't do that, but one of the better rules regarding defense is if you're committing your hands, you want it to be so that you can stay in range to counter. So if you're parrying the jab with your right hand, you want to be in range to come back with your right hand or with your counter jab or whatever. You're moving their punch out of the way because you want to stay in the place where their punch was going. If you're retreating out of range anyway, you probably don't want to be reaching for the punches because you're opening yourself up and you're not really going to do anything off it. If you're leaving range and you're reaching to parry, it feels like a belt and braces thing. Is that an expression in America? It's where you wear belt and suspenders, I suppose. But suspenders over here are like... don't know how that's going to come out on a podcast, but they're an item of lingerie, whereas in America they're things that nerds wear. But yeah, it feels like reaching to parry and moving out of range at the same time should be covering all your bases, but you're opening yourself up as you move out of range, and you just saw that left shin just rocketed through over his right hand, which was extended, and cracked him in the head. I mean, for Mano, it's probably not too pronounced an issue. It cost him in this fight, but if if his hand had been there, it probably wouldn't have been like forearm ready to take a kick like that. That could have just gone through his fist if it was up against his chin. But a couple who really did struggle with this was like Michael Bisping back in the day and Andrei Arlovsky too, where you move away from the opponent, but you also stretch your arms out towards them and create that opening. So both of those guys were big on getting caught with like the overhand as they backed up. But the combination was nice. It was a right uppercut stepping into sort of like a pushing left straight into a left high kick. The uppercut into the high kick, actually Camacho landed one of the hurting body kicks was a right straight left uppercut through the upright guard and then the right kick into the body. This one was the same thing but different. Same but different. What the uppercut is great at, the classic uppercut combination is right uppercut, left hook, right straight. Or just right uppercut, left hook, think Joshua Ruiz, the first knockdown. The uppercut lifts the head, the left hook slaps against the glove, the right hand comes down the center to where the head is now. It's all this lifting the head into the path of the strikes. But the wonderful thing about the uppercut also is that just showing it straightens people up. So you see guys like Nicky Holzken are very good at throwing the right uppercut, and the opponent will stand up straight and be like, good, didn't get caught by the uppercut, and then he'll follow it immediately with the left hook to the liver. You stretch them out, you make sure they're staying upright, just as your left hand goes in and digs into the liver. The Camacho body kick's the same here. And also, this Rakish head kick was very similar to what Jodson Clyde does, which is where he throws he's a southpaw, so he throws like a left straight and then a corkscrew right uppercut to lift the head up and push the opponent back, and then he throws the left high kick. The uppercut's a really interesting one because you can play with people's reactions really well off it. I really like a combination that Rico Verhoeven uses, which is right uppercut, left hook to the body, right push kick in the gut. So it's 2 body shots in a row, but you're lifting the head or lifting the posture up, or making sure the posture's up, really. Because if you hit them with the uppercut and their posture isn't up, you hit them with an uppercut, which is great. But you're making sure their posture's up, you're hitting them in the body, and then you're pushing them away so that you don't have to worry about them coming back at you. It's a really nice combination. Did it to Gokhan Saki. So yeah, Alexander Rakic arrives in the... Was he in the light heavyweight top 10? He might have been. I have never checked the light heavyweight top 10, if I'm honest. I just don't give a shit. And then Anthony Smith versus Alexander Gustafsson. Anthony Smith's still looking small. I mean, the poster is literally a giant Gustafsson, and he's holding Smith like a baby. Or if you crop it at just the right point, which I was going to for the last podcast, it looks like the top of his penis is Smith's head. But this was a pretty weird fight, I thought, because Alexander Gustafsson did very, very little for the first 2 rounds. And then he really picked it up in the 3rd round. And then in 4th round, Smith got back on him and just threw him over, or ran over him, rather. I thought Smith did a very good job of cutting the cage, which I haven't really seen anyone do it well against Gustafsson. He's always able to just sort of jog around. And he did do that sprint thing, which really annoys me, where he just turns and runs with his head bent over like the Naruto run. Someone sent me a gif of that saying, like, this is how he gets off the cage. I loved it. But for the most part, he wasn't able to do that against Smith as easily. And Smith did a very good job of staying, strafing around with him, staying a little bit ahead of him. Gustafsson didn't really change directions that well. I thought it didn't fake him out very much. And Smith was able to catch him with hooks and round kicks, the things that really annoy people who like to do lots of circling along the fence. Smith's output wasn't particularly high, but then Gustafsson's wasn't in the first 2 rounds. His 3rd round, Smith lets off the pressure, which I think was after a right hand. I mean, he said he broke his hand. It's always dangerous to say you broke your hand in the cage after the fight, because a lot of the time it isn't a break. It's like a sprain or a bruise, which is severe enough to make it hard for you to throw the punch, but people will get pissy about it on social media afterwards and be like, oh, he didn't really break his hand. However, for whatever reason, Smith backed up in the 3rd round and wasn't able to apply the pressure as effectively. Gustafsson did a good job there, landed a beautiful body kick, and Smith turned side on to get away from this body kick and just sort of to crunch down into himself. Gustafsson immediately moved to a clinch and hit a sag throw because he was side on and he could catch the trip on that leg. 4th round, Smith back on it. Gustafsson goes for a takedown, but it was like the sort of weird knee pick thing that he went for the Zabit cross buttock thing, the Osatagari hopping in, or the Akiyama throw if you're old school and like really boring fighters. But Gustafsson went for that Frankie Edgar knee pick, where you pick up the knee and you push the opponent back by either the head or the chest, and his arm sort of popped off, so he was in danger of giving his back up. Threw the whizzer in, went to throw Anthony Smith over, but ended up getting taken down and giving his back up. So Smith gets on his back, and that's when I really saw the size difference. He looked like Fedor hanging off Hongman Choi on Alexander Gustafsson's back. But Gustafsson gets up to tripod him off. Smith keeps double underhooks, which is just, the answer to falling off like that. If you've not got Ryan Hall's series on back attacks, that's fantastic for back control details. But he's got a few things hook behind the buttock on one side and make a clamp with your legs, but the other one to stop yourself sliding down the back when they tripod up like that is to get the underhooks, rather than the seatbelt. And Smith held on to those, and then Gustafsson ended up either slipping or just being flattened out and falling forward. And Smith did a really good job of picking his elbows there, because lots of guys, when they flatten you from back control, they'll do the Big Mac Hughes swings against Royce Gracie, and dudes really do fuck around with the rules on that. They turn the back of their head towards the punch, which is super dangerous, because there's a reason we ban strikes to the back of the head. They can make you go blind or they can kill you, but dudes will do it to try and get the ref to go, hey, careful, and you see these guys on the back being more like reluctant to throw. But Smith was doing this thing where he'd press Gustafsson's head down into the mat and then drop the elbow off it. You know, those short elbows, but it was nice that he was just pushing Alexander Gustafsson's head into place and then dropping the elbow on it so that he couldn't turn away from it. That was really cool. And then you got the rear naked choke and won, which was really impressive. And Gustafsson retired off this. And I think, you know, fair enough. I was going to say he'll come back, but we're still waiting on Anthony Rumble Johnson. Though he is doing a grappling match with Craig Jones. And we're just at this point with like submission-only matches where I don't need to see these MMA fighters. You know, some of these are just, we sort of jumped the shark. They're doing Yoel Romero versus Huggy Bear. The giant fat dude who does flips and stuff. And you're just like, why? Who asked for that? It really is who's in Chael's Rolodex, basically. But I can understand Gustafsson has been painfully inactive, and that's been a real sticking point for fans for the last few years. But obviously, when you think about it, he's not inactive because he's turning down fights and shit. He's inactive because he's been injured. And you and I hate that. And people hate about Robert Whittaker too, and any injury-prone fighter, you hate that. But remember that he's going through the grind of getting ready to fight and then losing the fight, or he's going through the grind of recovering from an injury and getting re-injured. So for him, the last 5 years or whatever must have just been stop, start, finally get enough momentum together and healthy enough to get that match with the rematch with Jones. Screw the pooch there. And then you come into this one, and you just don't look like you have it anymore. I mean, he looked good, but in comparison to the rest of the light heavyweight division, but he didn't look like himself. But then himself is always sort of like a vague term with Alexander Gustafsson, because I have never seen him fight as well. And, you know, for people who believe that John Jones wasn't taking it seriously or whatever, that's fine, but I've never seen specifically Alexander Gustafsson putting together combinations and things as well as he did against John Jones. You know, he was being very creative there, which doesn't really matter who your opponent is. And then other fights, he's just like one punch at a time or swinging the long rear uppercut. In the Jones fight, he's jabbing to the body, jabbing to the head, coming with the left hook off it, and then the right hand. And he's throwing these like 4-punch combinations. And you're going, oh my god, this guy's a tremendous boxer. Where the fuck has this been the entire time? When he was fighting Thiago Silva, you know, guys who just aren't nearly as dangerous. Or the Ghost of Shogun. It's super strange. But then he always seemed to be sort of like the guy who rose to the occasion, because that fight with Daniel Cormier too, you know, his whole thing was like, I've got 2 very close losses to the guys who were the champions. Please consider me for another title shot. I don't know. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he does. Maybe he goes to boxing like Ross Pearson. I mean, he's got enough of a name that he could headline cards in Sweden. The UFC have got to be kicking themselves though, because they can't go back to Sweden too soon now. Though I don't know, how much do they earn from Swedish crowds? Is the concession stand entirely pickled fish? That's what I want to know. These are the important questions. But Anthony Smith now in weird limbo because he lost to Jones quite handily, and then he beat Alexander Gustafsson. So basically, he's just making the division look bad. Anthony Smith is a good fighter. There's always this thing, like, when Anthony Smith wins, do we pretend he's not a good fighter and the lightweight division is just trash, which it is? Or do we say that Anthony Smith was a really good fighter all along and now he's at a better weight, which he is? Or do we just trail off with our thoughts on the fight because we can't decide what our actual official stance is? So that's what I'm doing now. And then there was also a Ryzen event on, and I only watched a few from this one because it was croissant time. What are you going to do? But what I did like was Miyamoto versus Ken Asakura wasn't actually that bad. I mean, this was the double bill. The flyweight ones, I thought I'll watch those because I invested the time watching Jin Yu's fights. I have always enjoyed Ken Asakura. I like Miyamoto because I've met her and she's a cool person. And I'm invested in the kid's story, obviously. And Ayaka Hamasaki's also quite fun sometimes. So I thought, okay, cool. But they did both go to the decision and they weren't super. The Miyamoto Ken Asakura fight, I mean, there was a long bit of wall and stall, which is not supposed to exist in the ring, but does, because these people train at camps with cages, so they know how to push people to the boundary and take them down off that, or stop themselves being taken down off that. Couple of cool moments. I mean, Ken Asakura, the whole thing is that she was going to struggle to take down Miyamoto, because Miyamoto, even at 44, was a world-class wrestler. And Ken Asakura is not a world champion or whatever Miyu won. And she's still training with Seiko, who's like a world champion in her own right several times over. But Asakura has like the neater grappling game, but if you can't get on top, that's going to be very tricky. You know, even the best grapplers in the world, or in MMA at least, really struggle to attack from the bottom against good wrestlers. You know, this is why Rulon Gardner came in, had one MMA fight against Yoshida, who was really good and really good off his back for an MMA fighter back in the day, and just laid on him for 3 rounds, then went off again, because that's what Rulon Gardner do. But there were a couple of moments that I liked. There was a nice attempt on a Kimura, as Miyu was in on a leg to end the second round. There was a nice bit along the, it was like a dogfight position along the floor next to the ropes where Asakura had shot him for the takedown. Miyu had hit the whizzer strong, and they were both sort of like face down, trying not to let Asakura come up on her back. Miyu went to cartwheel. Asakura cartwheeled into like what was a sort of a crab ride attempt, but then ended up coming up on top. She's sort of in side control. She's past the guard, but Miyu's top knee is in, so she's holding like a cradle over the head and the top leg. And the problem that you got there is that the legs will sort of like stick together. You're not gonna. Some guys like to try and kneel on the top leg and go for a dance or something like that, but it's hard to like stretch someone out again once they're curled up in a ball like that. But Asakura did this really nice thing where she released the top leg, dropped her hand to the floor underneath the bottom leg, grabbed it at the ankle, pushed it away to make a gap so she could step over Miyu's top leg into that twisted mount or dope mount, or there's got to be another name for it, I can't remember what it is, but you know what I mean, where you've mounted that leg and you've sort of got their body twisted across themselves. And that's a good way to step into mount. Unfortunately, Miyu came up out of it and into the turtle, but it was a really nice little passing movement, because I quite like passing on a cradle from side control, especially no gi. And I love the twisted mount, the dope mount, whatever you want to call it. But I've always just tried to like kick back and step over that leg when I've got the cradle, and it doesn't really work that well. So now I'm going to try grabbing the ankle and just pushing it away on the other leg. We'll keep you posted on how that works out. And then Ayako Hamasaki versus Jinyu, meh. You know, like I said, I watched all Jinyu's fights. She is stunning, but her fights are very like meat and potatoes, not particularly interesting. And you like, you know, you get to the end of her fights and you go, if there was another 2 rounds, that might have cooked up a bit. But she's already fighting in 15-minute, 20-minute fights, or 25 minutes rather, for the Invicta title. So yeah. Though a bit weird that this title fight between them was the same length of time as the fight between as the rest of the MMA fights on the card. And it was 3 times 5, you know, at least do the 10-minute first round or something to differentiate it from the other fights. But yeah, she was hitting low kicks. Hamasaki took her down and laid on her for a while. Not a lot really happened. So yeah, I don't know why I'm wasting your time talking about it. Let's do a couple of questions, and then I've got to go and make a Filthy Casuals guide because I want to. And then we're going to do a load of other stuff this week because there's a big event coming up. Hijack Slack. Francis from New Zealand here, with more of a statement than a question. I started watching / illegally downloading Bellator cards during its golden era. Back when Alexander Shlemenko was middleweight champion, lighting bums up with spinning back fists and body blows. The Pitbull brothers fought every weekend. Ben Askren has left, so Andrei Kurashkov and Douglas Lima were out there murdering everyone who could make 170. It was truly an enjoyable time. Something stood out to me more than the great fights, though. Because a lot of their cards were held in California, referee Jason Herzog was assigned to a lot of the bouts. First, I noticed his footwork. He was always in perfect distance from the fighters and would move his feet and angle away from the action perfectly. Then I noticed he never seemed to make a bad stoppage call, always giving the hurt fighter enough opportunity to recover or stopping the bout at the perfect moment. I've never seen him make a bad call yet, although I'm sure he has. Despite this, he is never mentioned as one of the top referees. Herb Dean and John McCarthy get all the credit, but I think Herzog is light years ahead of those two. Do you agree with my assessment? Have you ever seen him make a bad call? Love your articles and podcasts. Have only discovered you last week and I'm obsessed with your work. Will surely be joining the Patreon soon. God bless. From Francis in New Zealand. Jason Herzog, actually, I was trying to think of some bad ones that he's done in this one. I can't remember too many egregious ones. You know, I remember the Kevin Sataki one. I moaned about that a minute ago. But I can't recall Jason Herzog doing too many really bad stoppages. It's like God says to Bender in that episode of Futurama, if you do your job right, people won't be sure you did anything at all. It's very easy to not notice him doing his job. Because, that's the thing about a referee. You're not supposed to steal the spotlight. You're supposed to be there to make sure no one gets hurt too badly and no one fouls too much. I did an article on refereeing, at Bleacher Report ages ago, and obviously I'm not a qualified referee. I have been meaning to go on. Is it Mark Goddard does the... Scroobius Pip is always on about someone's judging course and reffing course. I can't remember if it's Mark Goddard, but or it might be Leon Roberts. But I've always wanted to look into that, so that's something I'll invest in the future at some point. But one of the things that universally you can moan about with reffing is the positioning of the ref. And to me, this is one of the things that I've noticed is a big deal in saving people from unnecessary punishment and even deaths. If you watch the Benny Perrette, Emil Griffith fight, the problem is that Benny Perrette is held up by the ropes. The referee is not in position where he can see it clearly. He can't see that Perrette is actually out on his feet and taking a horrendous beating on the way down. And there's a few other, I gave there was an example, Bojack versus someone at the Garden. Bojack fought at the Garden every week, but the guy takes 45 punches in the corner because the referee's sort of walking around behind his back and can't see round his back. And it just really annoys me. And it's especially noticeable in MMA because if you're pacing across yourself on the other side of the ring and someone gets knocked down, you aren't going to get to the fallen fighter before the other guy jumps on him and smashes him 3 times while he's unconscious. The really good example I used in the reffing article was Mills Lane. Because, it might be something to do with Mills Lane being a boxer when he was younger. Mills Lane, if you watch him Holyfield versus Tyson, and, in that fight, there were bad calls made because Holyfield nutted the shit out of Tyson. And obviously, very hard to control those two because Tyson's trying to bite him, they're low-blowing each other, and Mills Lane is considerably smaller than those dudes too. But what I did like about Mills Lane is that he's square to the fighters, and he's moving like a fucking athlete. You don't have to be an athlete. Mills Lane was still a little old dude at the time, but you do want to move in the best manner possible, which is, sidestepping, using your feet as if you were looking at someone throwing a ball at you or something like that, rather than literally pacing around on the other side of the ring, which is what so many of these guys do. Now, it can go too far the other way. Obviously, you see those guys who get too close to the action. There'll always be the odd referee gets knocked out by missed punch thing. And of course, if you've got fighters who are going to move, you don't want to get in the way of them as they run, around the cage. So it's hard. You can't be up on them when they're along the fence, even if one guy's covering up, because he might make a run for it towards you. So it's a very tricky game to be able to do all that anyway, and then also to be considering the fouls and on the lookout for all of them the entire time. But I think so many bad stoppages would be prevented if refs stayed in proper position. And the other thing is refereeing from behind one fighter is not the way to do it, in my humble opinion, because that's exactly the same way you don't want to see a fight. There was a fight in Glory ages ago. It was when they first came to the UK. I think it was Tyron Spong versus Remy Bojansky, and the entire bout was filmed from behind Spong. So you got a great appreciation for Spong's lats, but you couldn't see anything he was doing. He'd go oh, and you'd see his back turn a bit, but you couldn't see if he was landing punches or what. And if one fighter gets pushed to a corner or the fence or something like that, and he is opening up on his opponent, and you can't see because you're standing right behind them what's landing, you're in trouble. But yeah, commenters, Jason Herzog, give us the bad stoppages and give us the good stoppages. If you've noticed him doing good stuff, fair play, give him credit for it. Cheers, Francis. Dear Jack, from your recent article, what other measures has Martin Nguyen made, or Martin Nguyen made? And what does he need to do to evolve into a better striker? Cordially, PJ. The Martin Nguyen one was a Patreon boy piece, but he's a very interesting fighter because he discovered he had this amazing right hand. He began landing it by waiting on counters, and he got very, very comfortable under fire, but he's now in this sort of position where he's hit a plateau because he doesn't really lead very effectively. And what he started adding is a low kick, and he used it against Bibiano Fernandez and then sort of didn't really push it enough. It was working really well, and had he kept at it, he could have made some openings, or just, taken Bibiano out of the fight with the kick on its own. It's that dangerous if they don't do anything about it. And he did it against, what's his name? Jumbada, whoever he just fought, who used to be the one champion. He kicked him in, and this guy was an experienced Nakmoy, but he kicked him in the low leg enough that eventually he sort of like hobbled and went on one leg, and then Nguyen jumped in and hit him with a flying knee in the chin. Very similar to that Rashad Coulter Tai Tuivasa finish. But I think the thing with Nguyen is that, and I think this is the thing with a lot of fighters, and personally, like, this is what I find when I'm training, is I don't particularly like combination punching, as in like getting into exchanging range and combination punching. I like, the longer karate style blitz stuff. I like counter punching. If I do go in for combinations, I like hitting the body. It's I always think it's like the most thankless task, going in for combination punches and focusing on the head, because that's the thing they're defending. That's the place you're most likely to get hit while you're trying to hit them. So I think for Nguyen, like, and the other thing is that if you want to counterpunch, it's best to annoy them, but also make them forget that you're trying to hit them in the head. Just make them think, oh, I've got to get him off me because he's doing this stuff. So I think for Nguyen, if you're not going to learn to like double jab and get in on your right hand, other options are learn to flurry your hands and end with low kicks, which is always a good option. Add more harassing weapons, things like that low kick, or a nice long front kick, really great for harassing people. Front kick to the face is one of those ones that, especially if you're a decent grappler like Nguyen, it sort of makes people react, because it's quite flustering to have a front kick thrown towards your face. They don't land flush a lot, but they do make people do stuff. They go, oh, fuck, better not stand still out of range with him again. I've got to get on him. I think we said before, like, if he mastered the inside low kick, if you've got a booming right hand, the inside low kick is your best friend. Like, Dan Henderson made a whole career out of that. Inside low kick, if you punt their leg really hard, that's great. If they pick their leg up and check, that's also great. You're not moving when you're checking. I think the other thing is to, like, you don't have to combo punch all the time. You don't have to do everything off a combo. You can do things out of clinches and stuff. We were talking about the sneaker with Andy Ruiz this week, but push people to the fence, and then get your head under theirs and break free with a flurry of punches, or just break free with the right hand on its own. It's finding these places to come from when guys are used to you waiting on their jab and trying to throw your right hand across the top. It's like, Joe Gans got really famous for the cross counter, but his way of doing that was to have this smashing jab that he just kept in the opponent's face until they started jabbing back at him, and then he'd cross counter them. I think where Nguyen is at is where striking in MMA largely was until quite recently, which is we've worked out counter striking works really well, but also everyone else has worked out counter striking has worked really well. So once they know you're a good counter striker, they're not going to lead as much. Now you need to get into like the area that Conor McGregor's so good at, and a few others, which is just making stuff happen. You've got to get out there, kick them in the body, throw punches at their head, but be ready to jump back so that you can throw your counters. Getting from lead to draw the counter onto the counter, that's where you're getting into like top level striking, as opposed to just head down, leading all the time, or waiting for the counter all the time. And obviously, everyone does lead and counter a bit, but, we're talking about, like, noticeable trends. And really, to be a top level counter striker, I think you need to be able to go forward and make stuff happen, and not just sort of like with gimmicky stuff. One of the things that Anderson Silva always did was it'd be like, if I'm not countering, I'm throwing jumping knees and, weird spinning shit to show off to the judges, but never like, I'm going to put my jab on him or throw a couple of combinations to try and hit him and then get him coming back at me. And I think that his career also, well, I mean, it's hard to say his career suffered, but I think his development sort of suffered towards the end. He's become a little bit more creative on the lead in recent years. It's still mainly a kicking game stuff, but I'd never thought that he used his leads to get onto the counter too well. His leads were sort of like breaking up the inactivity of his opponent when they were refusing to lead at him. Anyway, cheers, PJ. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. There'll be a Filthy Casuals guide dropping hopefully before this episode comes out, depending on upload times, or tomorrow, whatever. And then I'm also going to be doing an article for Actually, I don't want to ruin which fights I'm doing, but we're going to have an article for everyone, and then we're going to have an article for the Patreon boys, and then we'll have a second podcast to talk about previews later in the week. So good time to plug the Patreon because you'll get an extra article, but also because I'm working my arse off this week, and it's only possible because you guys are wonderful and support this podcast. So if you want to get on the Patreon, get the extra stuff, get the Cyril Gaines stuff, get the Martin Nguyen stuff, whoever I'm writing about that week, hop on board. There's always room on the hype train for you, my friend. And if you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I've written at any point, fightprimer.com. I forgot to talk about Andy Ruiz, but it was very cool. And if you want to know my thoughts on Andy Ruiz, go read my pre-fight piece, because all that stuff then happened in the fight, and I'm quite angry that no one read it. Right, I'm your boy Jack Slack. Fatty with the fast hands bless.